everyone, and welcome back to my series of tutorials on the point and click module I've built in Dreams. A bit like the logic tutorial for the master chip, this is not integral watching, so feel free to skip, but for those that want to see the logic behind, stay around. So starting off with the Inspectable chip, we have down here a trigger zone. This trigger zone is around the jug, if you recall from tutorial 2. What this is detecting is actually an emitted object from the master chip. So over here we've got an emitter, and that is emitting this ball here. So when that ball is emitted and hits the jug with inside the trigger zone, you get a positive value. So if you can just look there, you can kind of see the invisible ball. So when we detect the emitted ball, we want to power this logic, but what we also need to do is check a couple of other things before we do so. So the first thing we want to check is that the inventory is not open. We don't want the player to be able to inspect items in the scene when the inventory is open. So we have this not open and the interactable trigger zone wired into an AND gate. If we're not therefore using the inventory and we're triggering the zone, we just want to power on a variable which is Inspectable. This variable is used in the IMP IMP user interface over here. We check to see if we are inspectable, and if we are, we show the inspect. So what we then have is we have a second AND gate here. What we're checking with this AND gate is, first of all, whether we have detected the emitted object. We're not using the inventory, but also that we're pressing the inspect button. We don't want any of this logic to work unless the player presses square. So these are going to the AND gate, and then this AND gate then powers this. So the first thing it powers is a destroy all tags variable. Again, this destroy all tags variable is used by the master chip, and effectively what it is doing is destroying any of the follow me tiles that are already emitted in the scene. The reason it's doing that is because we're using another follow me tag to tell the character where to go. If you don't destroy the tile, the character will just stay where they are. So we destroy any follow me tiles, and we move onto the B selector of this selector. And the B selector is first of all powering the follow me tag and the look at me tag, because we want the character to look at the object, and it also powers the trigger zone around the object that's detecting the player. And the reason for this trigger zone is you don't want any of the further logic to power unless RTO is within the area of that object. So on that basis, if RTO is in that trigger zone, we want to check if the player is inspecting and is within the zone. And if they are within the zone and they're inspecting, then what we do is we power a transmitter that says that turns monologue on. Monologue is where the character says things relating to the object in the dialogue chip. Once it's done that, this just goes into a node for tidy logic, really. Once it's done that, the node then powers the Inspectable item number transmitter, and that's required for the dialogue again, because as we said in tutorial 2, every Inspectable has to have its own unique item ID, and that's transmitting the unique item ID. And then finally, what this piece of logic does is it resets on a timer and resets the selector. This is actually kind of there to make sure we don't get stuck in the logic. It's more of a fail-safe than anything else. What we want is, once we've pressed it, we have a 1 second timer on this that just resets it back to input A, so that this logic doesn't get stuck on, which is a bug I found. I'm sure there's a better way of doing it, but that's what we have. And that's kind of it for the Inspectable logic. What we also have though on this chip is, you'll probably have noticed, a couple more wireless receivers, and these are in relation to using items with this Inspectable. So say for instance, you had a pen, you could use your pen on this painting perhaps to, I don't know, draw on there, or you could have a pair of scissors and cut it up, or whatever sort of interaction you want. So similar to the inspecting logic, this kind of works exactly the same, but first of all we're checking to see if we press X this time and not square. We're also checking if we're using the inventory item. Now obviously you don't know what this is doing at the moment because we haven't done the inventory tutorial, but just bear with me for a second whilst we go through it. So again, what we're doing is, are we interacting with this jug, are we pressing the X button, and are we using an item at the same time? If we are, this is the AND gate, we move to selection C on the selector, and selection C is powering again most of the same logic. So it powers the follow me tag, the look at me tag, and the detect player. When it detects the player, it goes into an AND gate, which is just checking that it's C and it's detected, and it does the same logic with powering the item number and the reset timer. But what it's also doing is powering this chip, which is called usability, and in this chip you have the option of making this object an item that's usable with an inventory item. So by default that's turned off, so that item is not usable. So if you try to use an inventory item with this jug, it won't work, and it'll power a transmitter that is saying this is a negative usable item. Useful this for if you want to give negative commentary. So say if I used the pair of scissors for this item on the jug, you could make your character say that can't be done, or whatever. If you want this item to be usable, you just flick this switch, and what this then does is when it's powered by this, it'll move to the B output, and the B output gives you a positive usability transmitter. This would be then where you'd use logic later on to determine what the outcome of using that is. More of that to come in a later tutorial, and kind of getting a bit of ahead of yourself, but the logic's in here, so I have to show you. So that's kind of it for the Inspectable chip. It kind of looks complicated, but it's really not, and maybe it's not entirely the most logical logic, but it works on the most part. So we'll just very quickly look at the dialogue chip. I think I explained this mostly in the tutorial, but I'll do so again. So in here we have a wireless receiver checking whether or not monologue on has been powered. So if you recall, monologue on over here is powered whenever we want to say something when we're inspecting. Assuming therefore that it's powered, this then goes to another wireless receiver which is receiving the inspectable item number. So item number 2 into there, comes over here. Once obviously that's received, it's powered into the active port being telling the selector which port to be on. So item 2 needs to be on port 2, so port 0 is A, port 1 is B, port 2 therefore is C. So if we go in here, we should find the logic for the jug. So this is just a node powering it on for clean wires, really. Powering another selector, and this selector is cycling through these options. So effectively what this is doing is, first of all, it's turning on the selector, because what we don't want is A to always show, because if you read this unpowered, A would always be on. We don't want that. And then when we press it, we move to the next selection. So option, therefore, the first time you press inspect would move this to B, and B will give you the timeline that we did in 2, where I did some dodgy dialogue, and then when you press it again, it will cycle back to 1, or if you had a third option, it would cycle to C and D, etc, etc. And again, that is pretty much it. I will just show you this. This is the same sort of logic as this, but it's for inventory items. Tutorial 3 is actually going to be on inventory items, so I'll cover that there. So we'll just ignore that for now. And that is pretty much it. Hope that was helpful. Thanks.